the Steve Fox. Steve joins us to discuss what's happening with various ballot initiatives across the country. Welcome to Cannabis Economy. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our new YouTube channel with the handle Can Economy. That's two N's in the word economy. Not sure how you're accessing this, but please know you can get us through the new Cannabis Economy app in iTunes, through the iTunes podcast app, and Google Play. Steve is an important mind and voice in cannabis, of course, highlighted by his work in Colorado. As we make our way to November 2016, we discuss Arkansas, Ohio, and Missouri, along with California, Arizona, Nevada, and Massachusetts. Steve Fox on cannabis legislation. So it's true, we do have the Steve Fox again for a part two conversation. Steve, thanks so much for giving us some time.
Yeah, happy to be here, Seth.
Absolutely thrilled that you're happy to be here. And as far as time, I mean, time is of the essence for the industry and for yourself. So if there's one thing that you are in short supply of, it is time itself. What is taking most of that time right now? What would you say? I know you're working on a number of things, but what's the biggest thing?
Well, I'm actually spending a good amount of time right now working on some of the 2016 ballot initiatives that are out there. There's Massachusetts and Maine and Arizona, and I'm helping on those campaigns through the Marijuana Policy Project. And then I'm also helping out in Nevada through a separate ballot initiative committee out there.
Okay, well let's do the MPP stuff first. How much of what you're doing in those two states resembles what you did in Colorado? I'll start with that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a part of what I did in Colorado. In Colorado, I was working at the Marijuana Policy Project at the time, and I was basically fully in charge of the campaign, all aspects of it. Now I am just working on really the strategic communications side, doing some of the online communications, helping on that end, and just generally trying to help out on messaging and tone and so on.
Okay, so let's do Arizona first. What are the keys? It is the end of March here, 2016. What are the keys of what's happening there?
Well, Arizona is still in the midst of finishing up their signature drive, and are a good way of the ways there. Probably have more than 3/4 of what they need. They have until July to finish the drive, so there's plenty of time. So that ballot initiative signature drive should be completed sometime probably in May, but we'll see how that goes. And aside from that, it's really just a matter of getting the campaign running, getting the messaging out. We've done a couple public education efforts as we did in Colorado through billboards and other means, and are working on some additional efforts like that. So that's moving along.
Okay, I know that polling is about even in Arizona. Is that right? Maybe a little ahead.
Yeah, it is. It is. It should be close, but we're hoping that with the kind of bump that we've seen, actually not just in presidential election years, but in Alaska and Oregon in 2014, those initiatives ended up a bit higher than I expected. And I would think that with the presidential election turnout that we'll see this year, that we should end up a bit above where the early polling is.
Got it. Finish strong, just like Colorado. Yeah. I want to do Nevada, but you had mentioned besides Arizona, why am I blanking?
Sure. Maine and Massachusetts are the other two MPP states.
Okay. So Maine, was there an issue there? There was a legal issue, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the Secretary of State in their determination of whether all of the signatures were valid, or to determine which percent of the signatures were valid, ended up tossing out a large number of signatures, including 17,000 signatures that were found to be valid at the local level, but the Secretary of State said that the signature of the notary, the individual who notarized all of the petitions, basically which only means that the circulator goes out and collects the signatures. Then when the circulator turns them in, the circulator attests to the fact that he or she collected them and witnessed those signatures being collected. Right. And then the notary and the circulator signs that in front of the notary, and then the notary signs the form after. And the Secretary of State determined that the notary's signature didn't match the signature that was on file. But we know internally that the notary actually did sign all of those petitions, and that we've even had a handwriting expert look at it and determine that it is a match. So, we're hoping the court rules in the right way, but one never knows. Yeah. Right.
What is that person alive? Can't we just ask that person?
That I assume will be part of the court case that goes on. That person already has said that. Yes, he's still alive. Yeah. So
right.
But
okay.
Trust and verify, I guess.
Yeah, trust, right, exactly. And there's the governor up there is a little wacky, right? Isn't that the guy, Paul LePage, I think?
Yeah,
right.
He is. And frankly, I don't know the politics of the Secretary of State. Maybe I should. I don't know if there are any sort of politics involved here. Right. But as of now, it's just an issue of the signature, and we'll see how that plays out.
It might not be politics, but it does certainly sound like shenanigans, Steve Fox.
It does. It does. I mean, I don't know. I suppose I could give them the benefit of the doubt, but the truth is they knew the signatures on of the registered voters were legitimate, so it is a bit of a stretch to throw all of them out based on their belief, and they never even contacted the notary to ask whether he had signed them or not, which they acknowledged in the media, or accidentally said in the media, is their standard practice to check with a notary or a circulator if they sense there's some kind of issue, but they didn't even do that here. They just threw them all out. Okay.
All right. So then it does sound like we could feel maybe somewhat positive that we could kind of carry on as we were in Maine some point soon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we hope so, within about a month or so.
Great. All right. What needs to be done then after that kind of court case and signature validation? Well, after that, what's the next step in Maine? Same type of thing? Or?
Yeah, it's the same basic pattern throughout, and this is a model that we developed in Colorado, and it really is based on spending time during the early stages of the campaign talking about marijuana and alcohol and comparing the two and helping voters understand that despite what they've heard throughout their lives, that marijuana is far less harmful than alcohol, and it really doesn't make any sense to punish adults who prefer to use the less harmful substance, and really just get that message out through whatever means we can, whether it's online or distributing flyers in the state or doing media events like billboards and signs on buses and other things like that, just to push that message further.
Yeah. How is it going in Massachusetts, public appeal, policy, and otherwise? How's it feeling?
Well, I mean, Massachusetts is a state that has voted numerous times on marijuana-related initiatives, whether it was a decrim initiative in 2008, medical marijuana in 2012, all kinds of local initiatives, getting the sense of localities, whether they support legalization, and they've always turned out, with the marijuana initiative receiving a majority of the vote So, we expect that the electorate is on our side, and what we're dealing with now is kind of an effort by elected officials to come out in opposition. There was an op-ed co-signed by the governor, the attorney general, and the mayor of Boston opposing the initiative, and there have been a couple other elected officials who have spoken out against it. So we'll counter that the way we always have. I mean, we faced something similar in Colorado when Governor Hickenlooper and the mayor of Denver, numerous other elected officials and leaders came out against it. But in the end, the opinion of the people is really what matters, and we expect that will be the case in Massachusetts as well.
Yeah, and you did have medical, obviously, in Colorado before you did adult use. Same situation in Massachusetts. It seems strange that would be the public opinion. With all of this positive or not negative, kind of feedback from legal cannabis elsewhere, what is the stance? Why are, yes, okay, fine, they've come out against it. Saying what? Saying why? What are the reasons?
It's the same kind of thing you tend to hear. Exaggerations about the harms of marijuana, a stated belief that this will lead to greater use among youth, claims that this is just big marijuana trying to get itself established, and so on. So those are the typical arguments that you hear.
On to Nevada. So you've got a little bit of a different role there. What do you mean?
Well, it's just a little more involved. In terms of the other states, it really is just more consulting on communications and so on. And in Nevada, there's a little more involvement in terms of helping to, coordinate the campaign, be part of the core team out there. Assist where I can in making introductions to other folks in the marijuana field who could be helpful, and so on. But in many ways it's similar because there is a real communications emphasis, but there's just a bit more involvement on the management side.
Yeah, and I would imagine you're paying attention because there's feared, moneyed opposition specifically in Nevada, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's one individual in particular, Sheldon Adelson, who owns the Venetian in Las Vegas and is based there. He actually just purchased the largest newspaper in the state, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is unfortunate because their editorial board has been very supportive of ending marijuana prohibition and regulating marijuana like alcohol. But he, Sheldon Adelson, after purchasing the paper, has asked the editorial board to reconsider their position and has asked them to visit a treatment center to, try to better understand the horrors that he believes marijuana is. And he spent $5 million in Florida in 2014, so he's certainly willing to spend money at times to oppose initiatives. So we'll see. I mean, one interesting piece of news is that it just was in the paper yesterday that this guy John Ralston, who's one of the real key media figures in the state, I guess got his hands on a poll that Sheldon Adelson had just done in Nevada to test some of the issues he cares about. And he did ask about marijuana and whether people had heard about and support the legalization initiative that was going to be on the ballot in November. And it came out 60 to 29 in favor of the initiative.
Wow.
So maybe he'll look at his own polling and understand that the people want this, and he'll maybe be howling at the moon to try to spend a lot of his money to do anything about it.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, $5 million is literally pennies for a guy like that, right?
It truly is. Yeah,
Yeah.
he really has billions, and more just keeps flowing in from the casinos he owns, not just here, but in Macau, I believe, and I'm not sure if others
Yeah.
as well.
So, all right. So, you have polling numbers, at least, somewhat internal, 60-29. We love those numbers. What else, as far as ballot initiatives, while we're here, let's talk about it. I know that those are the states that you're personally involved. What else can you tell us about what you think and what you hear? Let's, of course, talk about California.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about Colorado too, but yeah, I mean, California, obviously that's getting a lot of attention. I certainly think it's positioned to do well. It was written with an eye towards winning. I mean, there are certainly places where they weren't as conservative as they might have been in terms of like just trying to play for the win, for example, like with home cultivation, but that train kind of left the station when home cultivation was included in Oregon. So I think that's just now going to be a natural part of most ballot initiatives. But the point is that overall they really did a good job of talking to stakeholders throughout the state. You've already seen the California Medical Association endorsing the initiative, which is pretty impressive. And I think they'll have sufficient funds to run a good campaign. So I would say that the odds for California passing are somewhere around 95%. So I would think there's a very strong chance there.
Great. All right. So we've done a few of them. Any spots where you do see an issue? Any spots to pay attention to? Any spots to kind of push the forces to, if need be?
Well, that's obviously any of the initiatives I'm working on. If your listeners have any personal connection to any of those states, I would encourage them to either support the campaign financially or get in touch and see if there's a way to volunteer. We always need more people to get out and distribute literature and put a good face on the campaign. So I would encourage all of that. There also, I would mention the medical marijuana campaigns that are also going on. You're going to have one in Florida, which already qualified for the ballot. Arkansas is one, kind of flying under the radar, but with mostly a volunteer army down there. They've now collected over 67,000 signatures, and that's basically the number they need to qualify, but obviously you need to collect more to account for those that end up being invalid signatures. But I think they have a real solid chance of making the ballot, but they could use some money to do so. And I'm trying to think if there are any others. I think that, Missouri is also working on medical, so that's one that's in the work. Oh, and Ohio. That's one. Yep.
So Ohio, take us through your sense of what did happen just recently and the differences between that and what they've got for the ballot in 2016.
Well, if you're asking recently, you mean about the Responsible Ohio?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if I can add much to that.
We've talked about it enough, type of thing.
I guess, but for people who are listening to this podcast and don't know the background, basically you had 10 individuals who were collectively funding a ballot initiative campaign that would have made it so that those 10 individuals or the entities that they were with would have the exclusive ability to produce cannabis for the entire system. And both for the fact that it was an off-year election and the fact that they were pushing for full legalization instead of just medical, plus the fact that many people found the monopoly or oligopoly to be distasteful. It ended up, in the 30s in terms of support. So, so now the Marijuana Policy Project is working on a new initiative, which, as introduced, would have 15 producers that would be determined in a competitive application process that would have up to 30,000 square feet of cultivation, but then an undefined additional number of cultivators who could grow up to 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
So it's a different kind of setup.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I guess they're in the middle of getting their ballot language approved, or their ballot summary. It's always a challenge out there. You're supposed to produce your own summary that the Secretary of State needs to sign off on. So they're in the middle of that process, and then can launch the signature drive.
So you don't seem too concerned about the kind of how it did. 30% is pretty low. You're banking on the fact that was based on all of those other factors, being involved, and that is not the opinion of Ohioans about legal cannabis.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Okay.
interesting to think of such a shift in just 1 year's time. But just the fact that it will be medical only, and the dramatic difference between a 2015 electorate and a 2016 electorate, especially with it being one of the most important swing states in the presidential election, meaning there will be massive amounts of money invested in turning out as many voters as possible. Many of them younger and irregular voters who are very likely to support marijuana policy reform. I wouldn't have too much concern about it, just based on, what happened in 2015.
Got it. All right, so let's let Florida be Florida, and we'll kind of see what happens there. Arkansas and Missouri, though, those are different types of territories for legal cannabis. In this case, medical. What are your initial thoughts on how these things will do? And then after you answer that, I'm going to ask you about what happens if they do fail. So first things first, Arkansas and Missouri, what sense do you get about how these things will do?
Well, I mean, I worked on Arkansas in 2012, and that was before what I consider the real national change in attitude, which Sanjay Gupta helped to push along.
I see you did too, Steve. So let's just
Sure.
let's call a spade, right?
Fair enough. But I was like a consistent variable from 2002 until now.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So so he gave a real boost, and levels of support for medical marijuana have increased significantly since 2012. And when we did the 2012 campaign, I could go into detail, but a lot of things didn't fall our way that could have fallen our way, just in a political media sense, and we still ended up with 48.5% of the vote. So we came pretty close. So just the fact that marijuana-related initiatives and support for marijuana reform generally has gone up a point or two per year for the last 10, 15 years. Just demographic trends would lead you to believe that this would be, that it would garner more support. So, I mean, we did spend about $700,000 on paid media in 2012. This was through the Marijuana Policy Project, making contributions to the campaign.
Which,
so we'll
which
have to,
I could point out here that you could go ahead and donate to MPP if you're listening. because they clearly need the money.
Sure.
So go
Yes,
on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was talking about all the different states before, MPP is sort of the
Yeah.
umbrella that can make it easier for you to not have to decide which state to give to. Just
Indeed.
give to the top and let them allocate wisely. So, so we, would still hope that there would be some money available for paid media. You don't want to just go dark after the signature drive. But I think it will have a really good chance of passing, regardless of the size of the campaign, as long as it qualifies for the ballot.
Okay. So qualifying for the ballot aside,
Yeah.
let's say that everything goes okay. Okay. However, what if one of these medical states or one of these adult use states or two, what if we have some non-wins, as they're called? What do you think that that'll do to the national dialogue? What do you think that'll do to the, to the movement of legal cannabis? What effect do you think it'll have?
I don't know that it will have too much. I don't have great concern. If you're concerned about the larger progress, I mean, the bigger threat would be, Donald Trump winning and making Chris Christie his attorney general.
Right.
that I would have significant concerns about. But if some other candidate is elected, or I suppose, I would say more likely the Democratic candidate is elected, then I don't know that the state by state issues are going to really matter. I mean, it will be too bad if we have one or two or any of the states not pass, but I don't think it'll do much. I mean, the fact that you will have California and its massive population operating in a legal environment, and having the industry get up and running there. It's really it's just about already too entrenched to just shut off at this point. I mean,
Right.
you would any administration at this point would have to say, well, it's nice that there are now $5 billion that aren't going to drug cartels ultimately, or the underground market, and are now going to tax-paying businesses, but we're just going to shut it down and create this massive criminal market again in its place. I don't know. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to think that even our opponents in Colorado would
Yeah.
really want it to
Yeah.
all go back to an underground market. I don't see who benefits there.
Yeah. Well, then let's kind of play that thing, that theory forward. We kind of have to talk about the election at the presidential level, and as far as the Republican side of things, it looks like it would be Trump at this point. And so, anything can change. Okay, fine. What could happen if, what feasibly could be done, do you think, by a Christie, attorney generalship?
Well, I mean, yeah, they could issue threats and say that they're going to crack down, and then if people don't, I suppose they could, try to find a sacrificial lamb to send a message to other people that they really mean it, and then we would see what would happen.
Essentially cancel the Ogden memo, cancel the Cole memos, and here's a new memo type of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an option. What about the turnout? It seems that if the front runner Hillary Clinton and the front runner Donald Trump are the two candidates, it could be very high turnout, it could be very low turnout, but it also could be a lot of people really focused on not on legal cannabis. How do you think that those two candidates would affect the vote kind of nationwide. Talked to Chris Crane about this, and his point of view was, either side of that, we're okay, because the Democratic side is usually more positive, and the Trump side is a little bit libertarian. So he sees no problem with it. Do you?
Yeah,
As far as just the
I don't
vote,
know if
yeah.
I see a problem.
As far as the
for
vote,
us.
the turnout, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think I'd be hard pressed to think of a state where it would necessarily be a problem. I mean, I guess, if you're looking at states like, Missouri and Arkansas, for example, where the elections could be close, and if there's lower turnout, that tamps down the marijuana related number. I mean,
Right.
on the marijuana related side of things, it's pretty clear that when there's greater turnout, we end up doing better, because the greater turnout is usually a reflection of younger voters actually turning out who lean in our direction. So clearly Trump against Hillary isn't as good for us as Trump against Bernie Sanders, just purely in terms of turnout.
Right.
But I'm not necessarily overly concerned. I mean, I think there'll be a strong turnout regardless. The having Trump on the ballot may actually result in some Republicans just not voting, which is usually not the case. On the Republican side, especially among older voters, they're pretty dedicated. But I think Trump may turn some people off, and that could end up helping us by anti-marijuana people not voting.
Indeed. I think that you're not the only person that thinks that Donald Trump might be turning people off, by the way.
Yeah, I like to be careful in my wording.
Indeed. That is very, very carefully put. Okay, that's ballot initiatives, nationwide. That's Steve Fox's involvement. What else are you working on?
Well, I continue to be involved with the National Cannabis Industry Association at the federal level. And efforts are ongoing there. The primary goal right now is to fix the banking situation. And
what can you tell us? What's the latest?
Yeah, well, the primary means for trying to get this done at this point, or at least making the situation a bit better, is through a rider on the Financial Services Appropriations Bill, and riders, for those who don't know, are basically amendments added to the appropriations bills that say how money can and can't be spent. So this rider would prevent the federal government or Treasury and Justice specifically from spending funds to punish any financial institution that's working with a state legal cannabis business.
Right.
So, that passed in the House in 2014, a rider just like that, and then in 2015, it actually was adopted by the Senate Appropriations Committee, but unfortunately in neither year did it end up passing in both chambers. So it hasn't ended up in the final bill that was passed. So we're doing what's possible now to make sure that it becomes part of both bills during the appropriations process.
And the way that you describe it, it sounds like the financial version of the Cole memo, essentially.
Yeah. In a sense, it is, and it's also there's been the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment that's been adopted the last couple of years that would prevent the federal government from spending money to interfere with state medical marijuana laws. So it's similar to that as well.
Okay. All right. So that and what sense do you have of timing? It's tough to get anything done these days. I don't have to tell you that. But what kind of timeline do you have now? What are you looking at as a next kind of goalpost?
In which sense?
For the rider to somehow
Oh,
get through.
sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there was a letter sent out recently by a number of members of Congress to the heads of the relevant committees, asking that the rider be included in the initial markup of the bill. That would be the ideal way to get the rider included, because then you don't have to rely on committee votes or floor votes and so on. So we'll see if those efforts have any effect. Otherwise, we're looking at committee hearings coming up, in April, May, and we'll hope that we can have success during those committee hearings. If not in the House, it would end up being a floor vote, and from what I've been hearing, the financial services bill that this would be attached to would be one of the later appropriations bills, so it may not be until mid to late June that would reach the House floor.
Slow and steady wins the race, Steve Fox, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very slow, very steady. But
I mean, that, just to kind of come out and think about or talk to you about how you think about this. I mean, you mentioned 2002 in the last interview we did. We talked plenty about the history and your role in it. How do you stay centered? How do is it that you also mentioned the fact that public support and everything is going our way. We just have to kind of wait for it to happen, kind of thing, or excuse me, continue to participate in occurring. How do you kind of stay enthused and kind of operational in the face of just what seems like slow as molasses pace?
yeah, I mean, I guess just having a good sense that this is a long battle,
Yeah.
and it's just continual progress. I mean, we seem to be moving in one direction, and we're just going to keep riding that wave as long and as far as we can. So,
Do you care to prognosticate about maybe a majority of legal states is potentially on the ballot, so legal medical states. What is your sense of when will kind of mostly be medical? When we'll kind of have adult use kind of in a bunch of places, at least 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 states, kind of half the states. What do you think? It's a long battle. Do you even think about that? Or do you just go, let me wake up on Monday and start over again?
yeah, I mean, I guess the way I see it is that we're working hard this year, and after California passes, along with a number of others, I think that's really going to be a significant wake-up call to the rest of the country. Not just based on the basic trend of it, but just also seeing how it really just seems to make sense. I mean, you can already look at Colorado, and if you were really to just take an outside look at Colorado right now, even putting marijuana aside, what you would see is a state that's growing, that young people are moving to. It's creating more jobs than almost any other state. The economy is doing well. Denver was just ranked as the best city to live in the country, and and all is going well. And it's not that we're saying all of that is because of marijuana, but all of that is certainly happening while marijuana is legal.
Right.
And it's not like there are things to point to that are, really terribly wrong. I mean, there are some things we want to fix, if there are accidental ingestion, of edibles by young people, then we want to make sure that, there's better labeling, better packaging, adults are smart enough to store their edibles where kids can't get a hold of them.
Right.
But there just aren't dramatic negative issues happening in the state, and that's just going to become more and more apparent, and people are just going to wise up to the fact that they've been tricked into living in a society where alcohol, which is far more harmful and dangerous than marijuana, is legal and accepted, and marijuana has been illegal. But the point is that marijuana isn't much different than alcohol, except it's far less harmful.
I feel like I've heard you say that before, Steve.
Yeah.
Once or twice,
I may
right?
have said it. Yeah. It may have been quoted here and there.
Maybe even in a book.
Yeah, indeed.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think that we asked you the surprise questions. What has most surprised you in cannabis and life? Last time, I don't think that we asked you about your soundtrack song. And so here it is, the final question, Steve. On the Steve Fox soundtrack, of your life, what is one track or one song that must be on there? I would imagine you're not asked that too often.
No, I'm really, really not. But I would just go. I don't know if I can pick a song, but in honor of my good friend Jamie Lewis with Mountain Medicine.
Sure.
She's now chair of the NCIA board. I will just say that it would just be a West Coast rap soundtrack, and I would have to pick out the 10 or 15 best tracks, and some of them may not be suitable for children. So
fair enough. Well, so then here's what we'll do. I'll go ahead and talk to Jamie. Are you paying your song forward to her that she should name your song?
I would be happy to have her name my song, because then she can probably name the appropriate song, and I won't be criticized for choosing it myself.
Perfect. That's exactly what we'll do. Steve Fox, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Seth.
So there you have Steve Fox. Obviously busy at work all across the country, trying to replicate in some way what happened in Colorado. Of course, it was him and many others in Colorado, as it will be him and many others across the country. So heed his advice, donate if you'd like. In any case, we very much appreciate you listening, so thank you.